Welcome back to Coffee and Grace, your new weekly destination for thoughtful connection and brave tea litty lit conversation. Here we are, another week, and I am your host, Grace Warrior, and culture strategist Dee Kendricks. Well, here we are, folks. We made it yet another week to see each other. I, especially in the world that we live in today, am no longer taking any day for granted, and in particular, not taking any days that I am able to come fully functional for granted, because nothing is to be assumed about there being another moment in time to do anything. And so live every moment as if it's your last with intention. So let's move to what's on my mind this week. Well, again, as usual, there's always things on my mind. I'd say top of mind is that I got my vaccine this past weekend. So that was interesting. I got the first shot, and I'd say for the first day, I felt a little sluggish. And then after that, I felt like I had the flu for about a day and a half. And then all of a sudden, I felt completely normal. But the takeaway, I would say, is that I would do it 20 times over if it means that it will accomplish exactly what we're hoping that it accomplish, which is to make us immune from this nasty strain and virus. Next up on my mind this week is clearly our topic of the week, and that is race and friendships, or interracial friendships, however I think you want to call it or say it. It's on my mind because I think in this world that we live in of what I would consider to be consistent and perpetual racial unrest. There is the social unrest, there's civil unrest, but I think we perpetually live in a state of racial unrest for a whole lot of reasons that I don't know that we'll even get to this hour. But even as we faced this week and the most recent week, there was a number of other events that happened, and hate crimes and race meeting us at our front door are starting to creep outside of what has just normally been, so to speak, a white and black, or black and systemic, or, those kind of scenarios. We're now dealing with the Asian population being targeted. We're dealing with women being targeted, you name it. But in all of that, what I always hear offered up as a bit of advice is that dealing with racism and bias on its baseline level needs to start with your circles looking different than you. And if I were to put it in plain English, what they're sometimes explicitly saying is, if all of your friends look like you, then you're not living a diverse life. And I think some of that has some merit. What I do believe is that it's hard for you to embrace difference if there's nothing different around you. But I do think it's a bit of a half-baked conversation that's happening. And by that, I mean, it stops at that. There's really no conversation around, at least at the public platform level, around, well, is it critical to have interracial friendships? How do they add value? Is it difficult, or why is it not something that feels normal? And so I'm not even gonna debrief and digest solo today. I feel like these conversations are not happening on a public platform, but they are happening at dinner tables, kitchen tables, and coffee tables. And so I brought my friends today to the coffee table, because I wanted to have a real girlfriend chat with them. And so I've asked some friends to come on in, and I'm going to introduce them as they kind of enter the table here and enter the room, to have a real conversation about race and friendships. And while my friends are coming to the screen, I'll say that I intentionally selected friends who I knew had pretty diverse circles, if you will. And so a couple of folks joining us today. First up is Sherry Tran. Sherry, I have known Sherry what feels like either somewhere between 5 years or 7 years. I just remember moving to Wisconsin and us being friends. And so it'll be funny when she hits the screen and we start to talk, because I normally remember everything and I can't remember when I met Sherry. But Sherry is a lot of things. Sherry is what I like to call a community anchor. She is the co-founder for Elevation, which she'll share more about. She's also a D&I strategist extraordinaire, and saving organizations by day, and foodie, soon to be professional food critic by night. I titled and knighted her with that title, but I think anybody that knows her feels that. And so, hi, Sherry. Welcome to the coffee table. And then we'll keep going and say Chris Ducato is also with us today. Chris is a good friend of mine, and we met because we were neighbors. Actually, we met because my dog, which was my stepdog, quote unquote, at the time, on my first walk with him, jumped on Kristen. And I was really just hoping that she didn't call the police and yell at me and curse me out. But in fact, she turned out to be an amazing dog mom and lover herself. Chris is a risk management legal maven, also community leader, and an amazing friend of mine. Last but not least, we have my dear friend, Felicia Kinsey, who I have known literally what sounds exaggerative, but probably over 30 years. Felicia is a revenue architect for national publications. She is a community change agent, and most recently became a bonus mom to an adorable 2-year-old. And I will tell you, we're also couple friends, and that we hang out with the significant others of the lovely ladies that are joining us. And Felicia also, I would say, wears the crown for the best matron of honor, because she was mine, and I'm pretty sure there was none better. So hello, ladies, and welcome to the coffee table.
Hi, Dee.
Hello, 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 hello. How are you guys?
Happy to be here.
I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. Like a whole ton. You guys look lovely.
Feeling great.
Feeling great. Hanging in there pandemic style.
There you go.
Florida.
So normally around this moment, I would ask first what people had in their cup. And so I feel like half of you are at least working. So I will still do it because it's fun. I'm drinking actually water today because I had a bunch of running around to do before this. And if I didn't hydrate, I would be stuttering in 2 seconds. So Felicia, what's in your cup today?
Well, I actually have my first cup of coffee today.
Listen.
Because I've been running around with the 2-year-old.
Listen. Some of these days treat us that way, where we need, at your time, it's what, 3 p.m.? Felicia is also, one of Brooklyn's finest. And so she, myself, and Chris hail from a bit of an East Coast heritage. But myself, Chris, and Sherry all met in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to which the two of them are still there full time, and I'm there every couple of weeks. So, Chris, what you drinking today? What's in your cup?
Well, it's currently the last sip of coffee, but this is my favorite mug, and it's broken, but it's my favorite mug for a number of reasons. It was a gift from my mom. So it says, "Behind every successful woman is herself."
How poetic. And how poetic that it's broken. And that it's from your
Yes.
mom. We could dive into that for an hour, but that's not the topic today. So we're not going to do it. Sherry.
Yes.
Sherry.
I had to supersize. I had to go bigger than a mug because I need more water in my life.
Listen, ma'am.
I am drinking water because I just need to have that good cleansing energy. Need that water to keep me hydrated.
Yes. People don't always realize how water plays so besides the health benefits, the energetic benefits of water and having water around you. Again, another topic, like when we have the Energy 101 show, I'm going to tell y'all what I learned because y'all think I'd be sleeping on my energy stuff, but I don't. So I'll also share that these ladies, although they're all girlfriends of mine, they are not friends individual, together. They don't know each other. They've all been in the same room at some point, at a minimum at my wedding, at a minimum.
Yes.
But it's definitely probably some other rooms. And And so that's interesting because this represents really well my circle of friends. And so one thing you guys should know about me in the show is I get sidetracked easily, which is fine because I think that's how I am in real life. Is that I'm a walking, talking ADD cliche. But do you guys keep your friends separate? Like, do you have separate groups of girlfriends and friends that you? I, for one, I don't know if it's because I've moved so often, up until the last 3 years of my life, and I really credit my husband to it. None of my friends really knew each other, and I kind of liked it that way, to be very honest. Why are y'all? So, do you guys have separate friends?
I actually do have some friends that do interconnect or overlap, and some that don't. Right?
Yep.
Some have merged over the years, and some just have very different interests. Some, just don't have the same interest or don't have that commonality
Mm-hmm.
that I have with this other group of friends. So they tend to just naturally be separate. But I try to bring them together. And opportunities that I can, like, big events like birthdays and whatnot. And people sometimes form new connections, but,
This is true.
Nothing other than that intentionally.
I think that makes you a better Sagittarius than me. I do invite them to central spaces like that, but yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'll get underneath that with a therapist one day as to why I like that. Felicia, Chris, friends separate, together.
No, I think my friends, I have a ton of friends. I don't intentionally try to separate them, but I would say that I have friends who have spanned ever since I was in
Yeah,
first grade, and they're still in my life. And then they kind of intertangle with my
yes,
family.
yeah,
And then I have work friends who, yes, if I have an event at home, I'll invite my work friends. And they're really not that many, just a few, but I try to bring them together as well, just like Sherry said. Um, Otherwise, I mean, I think everybody's pretty together. I have a good group of family, friends, sisters, things like that. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I
I
get
think I
that.
have a good entanglement.
I get that. Chris, how about you?
You know, I think to the extent my friends don't intermingle, a lot of that is geography because I think like Dee, I've lived in a bunch of places. So, you've got the Connecticut friends, you've
Yeah,
got the Virginia friends. So they're separated in that way, but everybody always calls Milwaukee small walkie. And so I think to some extent my Milwaukee friends um, either know each other from different arenas. We certainly try to, entertain at our house and invite everybody, but there are kind of, to Felicia's point, like the work
yeah.
friends, yeah.
So, speaking of friends, on topic actually, there the topic of this show is about race and friendships and particularly interracial friendships. And for those listening, to be even more direct, I would say, platonic, non-romantic friendships with people who are of an ethnicity other than your own. How's that for an explanation? And so
That's
there's
good.
this data. You guys know that I love a good data point. I just do. And so I want to say, and I'm going to make sure because I want to make sure I quote it correctly, WashingtonPost.com posted a survey and data point about the fact that the average white American, out of 100 of their friends, there's at least 9 of them, right, that are of a different ethnicity. But typically only one of those are black, and one of those may be Latino, and one of those may be Asian. And then we get into interracial, right, ethnicities and ambiguous racial cultures. And then they also did the same study with the average, whatever the average black or average white American is. And they said, hey, within that group, Typically, for every 100 or so, 17 of those folks are of a different ethnicity. What I found interesting was that typically of that hub, 8 of those were folks that were white and Caucasian, and perhaps 2 that were Latino, no Asian, and then we get into the mixed race friends and other races and ambiguity. I find the data to be interesting, not necessarily shocking, but just interesting and intriguing, because I think the implication, right, is that number one, at a baseline, interracial friendships are not a common thing. And so I come back to you ladies and I open it up with this question. Number one, does the data surprise you at all, that particular data? And 2, do you believe that interracial relationships are actually difficult?
I can start.
Yeah, share.
That graphic doesn't surprise me. I've seen it actually when that article came out, and I was just sharing it with everybody I knew.
Right.
Saying, look at this.
It's one of my favorites.
Am I that one Asian that you use for your circle? Am I the one for you? Am I the one for you? And a lot of times that's the case. I mean, I grew up in a white suburban community as kind of the only person of color that people had experience with. So I was that one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I think are the friendships difficult? I think they can be, but I don't think inherently that they should be. I mean, if you're looking at friendships just based on what makes you connected to another person, none of those things are relevant around just the way you look. It's about what you like, what your interests are, what you have in common from experience perspectives. And so from that, definition, I don't think they should be difficult because friendships at their roots are based on things that you love to do together.
Yeah. And so Felicia and Chris, I offer the same question, right? Does the data point surprise you? And do you feel like, as you all with Sherry, I consider to have pretty diverse networks and circles, do you think that interracial relationships are difficult?
I think, like Sherry said, they can be difficult if you make them difficult. If when we define friendship, or when I define friendship, it's a person who is close to my heart, who I feel a connection with, who I have similar interests with. These are people who I invite to my home, and they can go in my refrigerator if they wanted to, because I actually trust them that much and I care about them that much. And when I define friendship that way, while I have a lot of friends because I am a very outgoing person, I don't consider everybody my friend.
So let's pause there for a second. So that brings me to a good question, right? I think in today's era, friendship is a universal term, not used universally the same with every individual. I think I personally really just got comfortable referring to people as friends on a bit more of a common level. I've always kept what I considered friends. The numbers were always so low for me, just because of my upbringing, truth be told, right? And having to deal with a lot of folks who I couldn't trust. And so trust was always the defining for me of what I considered to be a friend. And I, based on my schedule, to be really honest with you, just didn't have a lot of space for people to even be able for me to build that trust with. And so, Felicia, when you talk about, you've explained to us what friendship means to you, share a little bit about your circle, right? Like, what does your circle look like? Because you've already explained what you consider, because that one of my questions was going to be, where are the people who don't look like you in your circle? Like, are they in the, it's my family? Are they in the, I'll invite them over for dinner every now and then? Or are they really what the large majority would consider to be the more like an acquaintance, the super close trusted acquaintance, if you will. So tell us a little bit about where diversity sits in your friendship circle.
Sure. So I have friends who I went to school with, I grew up with, of course, who have become family. I also have friends from work. You know, my environment at work. I mean, I've been in the publishing industry for 27 years. I've worked for an all Black publishing brand, and I have those friends, maybe two or three from that organization in general. Then I have friends at the bigger corporation that I'm at, and you know, actually, I was talking with a friend, a longtime friend, 17 years. We've been friends. Kate and I, we
Is Kate
met
white or what ethnicity?
She's white.
Okay.
She's white. And Kate and I have known each other for 17 years. And I said to her the other day, I actually told her that I was going to be on your show. And she said, "Oh, you got to tell me how that goes." Oh my gosh, that sounds really interesting. And she said, "I'm so happy we're friends.
Yes.
I'm so happy that you were the person who went through my father and her father and her, when they were going through chemotherapy, when she was going through his chemotherapy, I was there with her on the phone from work, you know, giving her some jokes, giving her some laughs. And we've become really great friends over the years. One of the things that we don't talk about is politics.
So pause there.
Yes.
Because I want to come back there. So, so Chris, you know, I know, so, and Chris is thick skinned like me, so I could say this. So I happen to know that I'm not Chris's only Black friend, right? So when these conversations happen, I know that I'm not her only Black friend. And in fact, I've met some of her other Black friends, as well as some of her other Hispanic friends and Asian friends, etc. Chris, would you say that your inner circle is super diverse, or that it is the folks that you socially kind of connect with every once in a while?
So I would say for my friends, my inner circle is very diverse. And to Felicia's point, my definition of friend is kind of like, it used to be more of the acquaintance. It's become more of the family as I get older. Like my people that I talk about as close friends are my family. And so those are people that I invite to my house. Those are people that I go out with and I share my life with. I would introduce to my family, my biological family. And, you know, I don't know how that came to be, but I think for me, those friends they feel like my family. They're close to my heart. They're in my heart. And, yeah, so maybe as some people would define it, it is an inner circle when you talk about family. It's less of the acquaintances.
No, I think, and I say that really so that we can really define, right, as we continue this conversation, folks to understand for all three of you, right? We're not just talking about folks who you happen to go to a dinner party with every now and then, right? These are people that you all have put the genuine effort into being a real relationship stakeholder, and they have done the same. And so one of my questions is, when we think about interracial relationships, I kind of want to break this down. Number one, do we think that it's more difficult between certain races and less difficult between others? Meaning, is it easier for me, or in general, to be friends with a Caucasian woman than it is maybe an Asian woman, or, you know, or right, a Hispanic woman? Do we think that it's race specific? Because I think, as much as I agree with you all that once the relationship is there, it's not difficult, I don't know that it's not. You know, actually, I would change my mind. I'd say that I don't think it's difficult to make friends of other races. I do think that difficulty finds its way in interracial relationships. But truth be told, I feel like difficulty finds its way in any relationship. I think that there's some unique implications when race is there, which will go. And so, on that line of thinking, my question would be, do we think that that difference or difficulty looks different based on race? And any one of you can tackle. In fact, I'll come back to Sherry, right? Sherry, and not even just with you, have you, in your observation, especially since you see this through a number of lenses, right? As a practitioner, but also as a human, as a community. What are your thoughts there?
It's interesting because I have the same question actually. And I've pondered this too. Like, is it more difficult if you have, let's just say women as friends to start with? That you have two women of color who are friends. Is it a little bit easier because there is some commonality of experience that doesn't exist when you're talking about perceived dominant culture versus minority culture, right? Like with a white community with a minority friend or a friend of color. I think there is maybe a bit of an ease that comes with that common experience, or probably a shared perspective. But that doesn't mean that, all white friends have a different perspective either.
This is true.
But I think it's just more of that lived experience that's different. I know that, one of my first very diverse circles of friends that was not white was a group of Latino women, that we became super close, and just there were common struggles that we related to with one another as being, diverse women in the workplace, working in, corporate environments, nonprofit environments, and just we're able to share stories and say, yeah, I understand, or I hear you and I feel you. I've had that same experience. So there is a different level of ease, I think, that comes with that. But I don't think that makes it more difficult to be friends. If it's along a different racial lines with white versus people of color, I don't think it makes it more difficult.
I agree. I don't think it makes it more difficult, but I think it makes it more uncomfortable, which really gets to the core, right, of, again, when we come back to a matter of race relations, period, right? I have a quote where I say, and I believe this to be true, any successful interracial relationship is paved with mistakes, hurt feelings, and courage and fear. And so I think there's very few relationships that I have that are interracial we're tight, where there hasn't been some moment of friction. Some, right? But I think our base, or should I say our comfort level, or our ability and desire to be willing to be uncomfortable with each other, is really what allowed us to pave through and have some difficult conversations that we were able to maturely have that, truth be told, I'm looking at a whole social media platform, can't seem to pull off, right? So I go back to Felicia and say, you mentioned a comment around the fact that you don't touch politics with Kate. The question I ask is, what can be difficult? Right? Because we don't want to sugarcoat, but at the same time, which we're going to get to, there's clear value. But what can be difficult? What are the areas that people have to be wide-eyed around, either leaning into relationships with other human beings who just are different from them, starting with ethnicity?
I think, and I'll share this experience with you. For instance, I've lived in Brooklyn all my life, so that's 50 years. Okay,
that's a whole lot of Brooklyn.
That's a whole lot of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
And you have seen a whole lot of change.
I have seen a ton of change, and have been in the very middle of change. And I mean, I am in the same neighborhood I grew up in. So being married and coming from this community that was all Black, okay, and growing up around people who are now older and, you know, let's say 70 and above, being on my block specifically, we had there was the gentrification was happening in Brooklyn, and people didn't like it. Black people didn't like it. You know, why are white people coming in to our community, and now we get better services, or now we get, you know, more businesses opening, and we're the Black businesses, and, you know, you get that talk. I don't want them here. And so we had that divide, and it took what I knew as a young girl growing up in a block association. I happened to become my block association president. And it took that block association banding together and me saying at the forefront, listen, people are people. People buy where they want to buy, you know. And here's the question that I posed to a lot of the Black community that said, well, why are we getting better services now? And I said, well, hey, what did you do to say to that supermarket, don't give me those bad vegetables? Or what did you do to say, well, let me keep my parents home so that nobody else buys it? And if we live that way, then you can't really build a bigger and better community. You'll never get to know the outside world. And we started doing things where we would have just like fundraisers, a bake sale. We would get together and clean our block. Well, hey, okay, older Black person, when I asked for everyone to come out and clean up the tree wells, well, where are you?
Right.
If you're nowhere to be found, then, you know, how do you want to continue to be here in the community? Are you just going to be disgruntled?
No, I think that's a good point. And it actually brings to a point of, you know, that diversity isn't just about ethnic difference, right? And being interracial. That, you know, one of my thoughts sometimes is the fact that within each race, because we're all very different, and there are so many culture groups within, you know, if I put it this way, and I use this language on a regular basis, do you know how many versions of Black people there are, right? And the fact that I am so different from, truth be told, I feel like a good portion of my Black female friend network. And the same goes for Asian culture, Hispanic culture, you know, white culture. And could somebody someday kind of be like, listen, it's not that I'm afraid of difference, but by the time I adjust myself to embrace, you know, my agnostic and atheist friend, and then still prepare myself to engage into my evangelical friend, or my friend who is LGBTQIA+, or my friend who actually lives kind of more a free spirit lifestyle, I don't have no energy, right, for a whole lot more, and it has nothing to do with race and color. So do we think that maybe that's one of the things, like, that may actually be in the way sometimes of people going above and beyond to intentionally start interracial friendships? And I'm gonna go to this because I want to come back to what are, if you will, kind of the landmines, what makes some of these relationships difficult. But let's go to this. Do you think that one of the reasons that some folks may not is because there's already significant diversity within their subculture? And that's for either one of the ladies.
I'm going to say no. I mean, I'm sorry, Chris, you were going to talk.
Oh, no, I I mean, to the extent that people, what I hear you saying, Dee, is like, is it an emotional bandwidth issue? Is it, do I have the energy because I think it's going to be difficult? Is that kind of what you're asking?
I mean, it's however you interpret it. I think it is, right? I mean, it can be emotional bandwidth. I think it can be a tolerance level, right? For difference. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I tend to be sometimes hashtag no new friends. Not because I don't love people, because I do. I just don't. The way I friend, all of you know, I will avoid a phone call for 2 months because when I do talk to you, I want 3 hours.
Right.
As opposed to kind of this transactional. And so for me, there's but so much of that I got to go around, right? And so I wonder, right, if folks are like, listen, I don't have any more. But both of you are shaking your head no. And so I think what I hear you saying is that sounds like a cop-out. That's the response I got.
Without saying it.
Right. Okay. I'll take it. Sounds like a cop out. So listen, I'm going to keep going because we have to wrap up in like 5 minutes so that I can get you back to your amazing lives, because this is how fast time goes. 2 things I want to hit before we go. Number 1, I feel like we danced over what the landmines are. Because there are some landmines that you do need to watch out for. And I don't want to say avoid as much as I say be intentional, right? And so Felicia mentioned politics being one. I think religion sometimes is one. I think that sometimes I feel really bad for my non-Black friends because I think they don't know what to say. And does that make them bad? Even if they've done all the research in the world. I don't care if they took Ally 102 through 107. You're not always prepared to know what to say to someone who's of a different ethnicity. And so religion, politics, are there other areas that can make it pretty touchy?
I think other friends as well, and what they may potentially say. I had someone say in the middle of a party, did Karen put raisins in the potato salad?
No, they didn't. And why is her name Karen? Why is her name Karen?
Well, first of all, her name wasn't Karen.
Oh no, that's worse. Okay, I was slow to the roll on that.
So
yes,
it's that one friend that you have to question and say, okay,
why would you say that?
Here? Right, why would you say that?
Yes.
And pull them to the side and now ask them to leave. You know, so it's other friends as well that can be the landmines that destroy a friendship that you genuinely want to have.
You know, I think that brings a good point, right? That, and I don't know that we can unpack this piece today, but here's what I just got from that. That you have to be willing to be a friend in every moment, no matter what the situation is with every friend. And are you willing to, when you get into an interracial friendship, sacrifice other friendships for the sake of protecting that person as a human? And I think, is that a price that people are willing to pay sometimes? Right, here we go back again to discomfort. In closing, I want to ask this. Oftentimes, I think I hear a lot of times, I don't know where to find friends that don't look like me, right? And to their credit, when we think about the fact that some cities are just ultra segregated, diversity and inclusion is a clear issue in corporate America. And most of us spend 75% of our time in the workplace. If you are looking around and everybody does look like you, how do you engage, right, with people who don't look like you? And so I ask you all, because you all have these diverse circles, how did you do it? How do they go about engaging and starting to create this intentionally diverse circle? I'm gonna sit back while y'all drop this knowledge. Sherry, I haven't come to you in a while. I'm gonna start with you.
You know, I ask this question all the time. I'm like, well, if somebody asked me how to do it, well, I don't really know if I have an answer for them, right? Because it just comes naturally as just building friendships. You don't look at it from the, oh, I need a native, I need an indigenous friend, or I need a Latina friend, or, you don't like collect them all kind of situation. It's not like that, right? It's about, being open
Yeah.
and willing to really look beneath the surface at what you truly have in common from a values perspective, that transcends any physical difference that you might have. And in order to, I think it's more than just making that first friend, but then what happens after that first friend. I mean, there's circles that you can introduce people to, and they can do the same. And that's how your network grows. I think that's how my network has grown, because you create this genuine, trusting relationship with someone, and they invite you in to their more diverse world as well, right? Or they are kind of your, like, I call myself and also others like these cultural ambassadors for you, right? I mean, you have friends that will vouch for you and say, hey, I want you to meet this person. They're a great person. And that kind of sometimes opens the door. And I try to do that with other folks as well. And I'm a connector, right?
You are a master connector.
So that's one of the ways that, if you just are able to make that first connection, and then just really be intentional about opening yourself up to those opportunities and welcoming that person into your life, and hope they do the same.
Well said. Well, so in closing, I think that this is a conversation that we can come back to, because I think we could sit here for a long time. What I think we would all agree, and number one, I have to have you guys back because this is just fun. But I think we would all agree, whether it's common, uncommon, difficult, or not, there is value to making sure that your village is a representation of heritages, and ethnic backgrounds and life experiences other than your own. I think we'd all agree. I would not be who I am and how I show up every day if my village only looked and sounded like Deirdre. And you all are a part of that. And I fiercely appreciate you for that. And you have all invited me to your village. I may not have as much time to be around in the village as much as I like, but and so any closing thoughts before I move to the last sip, which is the moment in the show that I close with our guest in my closing thoughts. Any closing comments? Felicia, Chris, Sherry?
I think if people would just be open, be you, and just let it happen. Don't go looking for friendships. You won't find the best ones, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And just be open to your environment. And for those who are looking for friends, go outside.
Got it.
Just go outside.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Chris, closing comments.
I would say be willing to walk through the difficult part, be willing to be wrong, be willing to be open to other people's experience if it differs from your own.
Yes.
And stick it out, and just you've got to walk through it, and you've got to have the conversations, because that's what family and true friendship is about.
Wonderful. Sherry, you close this out technically. Any final thoughts?
I think, being open, absolutely, but really being intentional about finding those points of commonality.
Yeah.
And not focusing on those things that are different, right? I think that's a way to walk through life. Just, you'd be surprised at who you find commonality with a lot of times. And if you can find that one thing, it's just like pulling a thread. There's going to be so much more that you can discover if you're just willing to pull that first thread.
Well, ladies, thank you for joining me for this amazing conversation that I'm sure our listeners can relate to and appreciate. So time for the final sip. And this is the moment where I ask you to save us one final sip. It's the thing that separates us but keeps us together until we meet again. And for our final sip, I would share that a Brene Brown quote came to mind. And in fact, as I think about what Sherry shared, it ties connectly to what I have as the final sip. And I don't want to get the quote wrong. So I'll share that she says, "We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to." And the reason that's my final sip for this week is because oftentimes when you operate in the fear of having to do the work and do it alone, you opt to not do it at all. As Sherry said, I would say if you were listening to this podcast or watching me, where do I start? I say start with the intention. The reality is you attract exactly what you set your intention to. If your intention is to make your world is magical and harmonious and rich and vibrant as possible with every human that the universe would bless it with, then that's what you're going to attract. And what I will tell you is those people will come with experiences that will sharpen the iron of your experiences. And some days it won't be easy, but guess what? You don't have to do it alone. We were never meant to. They will be in the fight of maintaining amazing relationships with you. So until next time, which is next week, thank you for joining Koffee and Grace. Make sure that you leave your comment at all of our social media platforms that you'll see in the outro. We want to hear from you. What did you think about our conversation? What other conversations do you want us to have? Until next time, be bold, be authentic, but most importantly, be gracious. Thank you for joining the conversation. It was such a privilege to have you. We hope that you would keep joining the conversations. Meet us over at our social media where there's always a Koffee and Grace conversation happening.